Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. So nice to see everybody here today. Looks like the temperature up here kind of evened out. I have these kind of ingrained perceptions around temperature because when I first came to the monastery to ordain, they make the young monks kind of take care of many of the kind of, basic things like setting up cushions, all these different things. And at that place, it was a new monastery, and they built this kind of makeshift meditation hall in a barn. And the stove that they used to heat it was this like oil drip stove. So it didn't have a thermostat. So basically you had this kind of like valve, and you would turn the valve, and if you turned it a lot, more oil would fall into this kind of, like basin. And you had to light it, and then the oil would just keep falling and the fire would keep going so long as you turned the valve. And so it was in this kind of room, like, maybe about this big. And you had the opportunity to turn it one time. Because once the meditation started, you couldn't shift it again. You kind of, you had to open it, and then you had to gauge different things. One was the number of people. So if there was a lot of people, then the heat from people's bodies would heat the room up. Another one was kind of how cold it was outside. If it was very cold outside, then, it would take more heat. And then, it was also a factor of the amount of wind. So then I thought, okay, maybe I'll try to come up with this kind of like chart, how far I turn it. Because they had little numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4. And, then I could guess the temperature because if you got it wrong, people would get really angry with you. So like the most senior monks, they really loved it cold. So like they were used to living in a monastery, so you'd use like many sweaters. Probably that habit maybe has stuck with me because I think even now I'm wearing several layers. Kind of usually in the winter it might be like 5 layers. But other people were coming from their houses, so they were wearing like 2 layers, even in the middle of the winter. And so then they'd come in and they'd be like, can you make it hotter this time? And then the senior monks would come in at the end of the meditation. If you got it wrong, they'd be like, what is this, Thailand? It's boiling in here. And so you kind of develop this nervousness, like you'd be like, okay, we're to set it this time. And then during the whole meditation, you'd be gauging the temperature, with your body. Like it got hotter, you'd be like, oh God, it's getting hotter. What can I do? It got colder. Oh man, it's getting colder. What can I do? And then eventually that meditation hall shut down and they moved to the house. And I still remember when the thermostat was set and I would hear the thermostat click in, I got really, really happy. And so even to this day, I kind of, don't take thermostats for granted, They make the temperature almost exactly what a person wants, But, sometimes a lot of things in our meditation practice kind of are this way, kind of in life. Actually, we were talking, there was a question that came up on the retreat, and it was about how a person tells if they're advancing in their meditation practice or not, And it kind of came up, there's these basically, tends to be these 2 kinds of people. Not, there's many kinds of people, but one way you can break them up is into 2 kinds. You can break them up into many kinds. And one of these kind of big picture people, people who will evaluate a situation from a large scale. In other words, what are the factors in this situation, and how does this situation fit in with the principles by which I live? Fit in with the principles that I understand. And so going from first principles, a person reacts in a given situation. There's a lot of strength in this. These types of people tend to be kind of more what you call punya types, kind of wisdom types, and people who are able to fit the various elements in a given situation together and create a coherent whole. And try to see where something fits in or doesn't. And this is kind of the basis actually behind scientific thinking a lot of the time. Kind of develop this unified view of the universe so you can manipulate the given causes. And there's also a kind of another type of person. It's kind of what we call like a small picture person. And kind of these people tend to be very good at intuition. It's kind of, there's given elements in a situation, and maybe like a whole bunch of different things. What do I do? What feels right? How should I react right now? Not what's the big picture, like what should I do now? And these people tend to have a lot of strength in going with the flow, where people who are always trying to think in terms of the big picture can't adapt as quickly and can't adjust themselves to changing streams of conditions. So both of these kind of qualities of character have a lot of strength to them. And both of these qualities of character are things that we have to develop. Actually, I remember one time I took an ink blot test, and I'd never taken an ink blot test before. I was expecting all these kind of, like crazy things, like he'd be focusing, what do you see in this ink blot? And I'd be like a butterfly, and these things around, I don't know what those are. What do you see in this ink blot? I see this. And there was maybe like 6 or 7 ink blots. You hear about these ink blot tests like from the time you're young, but you never get to take them. The kind of situation arose where I took this ink blot test. And I was expecting them to do like this big evaluation on like, oh, you saw a butterfly. That butterfly is a metaphor that means that, you think this in this way. But actually what they were looking for was whether I was trying to see things in terms of the whole picture or whether I was seeing things in the small picture. And so what the lady told me was, every single ink blot you looked at, you were trying to look at what the big thing was, Like even some that didn't actually really look like they had a big thing, you tried to make it into a big picture. This was kind of her evaluation of my personality at the time. It was kind of a big picture, no little picture. So her advice was, you should try to develop some smaller scale thinking as well, develop the little picture as well. And so what this basically is like this kind of dial on the stove. There's many given elements that go into the situations in our life. We have these principles that are present in the Buddhist teaching. And we have these principles, don't lie, don't kill, don't steal, one should be a person should be faithful, and don't take intoxicants, don't do any of these things. And we have various principles that are set out in the suttas. For a monk, it's very clear. It's kind of like go to the forest. Not like it has to be that way. There are other examples in the suttas, but in general, when you read the suttas, kind of go to the forest, go on your alms round, don't say anything to anybody, collect your food, come back from your alms round, go to the root of your tree, and meditate there the whole day. Sleep 4 hours a night, get up in the middle of the night, and meditate till you go on alms round. And this is the general pattern that's kind of laid out. But within these kind of general patterns, even within the suttas, there's a lot of small-scale things where it sometimes seems like the Buddha's actually going against advice that he's given in previous suttas. So there's actually suttas, a lot of them, where the Buddha kind of criticizes people who get into debates. There's this ancient Indian debating tradition that was actually very strong. And actually even towards the end of Buddhism's time in India, there would be these kind of clashes between Buddhists and Hindus, kind of as Buddhism was on its way out there. And like a Buddhist teacher, a Hindu teacher would get together with all their followers and they have this kind of debate. And whoever lost the debate had to convert, with all their followers to the other person's religion. So it was kind of high stakes debate. I can't remember. They actually have a Sanskrit word for this kind of debate, but I don't remember it. But anyways, the Buddha would criticize this because actually it went on at his time. It's kind of like these political debates where people score points and become very famous for their debating skills. He would kind of strongly criticize this. And then, yet you're going through the suttas, And you find another situation where the Buddha's debating with people. There's even situations in the suttas where he goes and looks for people and then debates with them. And you see this over and over again. There was actually this famous teacher in the modern day whose name was Ajahn Chah. I think probably many people have heard of him. Maybe not everybody, but many people. And one of the things he was kind of famous for, well known for, was that he would give kind of sometimes radically different advice to different people. Okay? So one person he would say, do this. Another person would come to them and he would say, don't do this. Sometimes the same person, sometimes he'd say, do this. Another time, that same person, he'd say, don't do this. And people ask him about it. Why are you doing this? Why are you teaching people this way? And he said, well, sometimes it's like you see a road with two ditches on either side. And you see a person kind of walking down this road, kind of stumbling. And you see that person about to fall into the ditch on the right, then you say, go left. And if you see that person about to fall in a ditch on the left, you say, go right. In other words, trying to get to a point of balance, to a point of what's appropriate to staying in the middle of the road. And this is where a lot of the skill in meditation actually comes in. It's where a lot of the skill in our Buddhist practice comes in, because although things are laid out very clearly, actually when it comes to day-to-day life, there's a lot of things that are quite tricky. So actually, remember the other day, I was walking on this kind of underground path, and usually people are kind of very friendly, generally, especially what I learned is you have to wave at them, kind of, hey, how's it going? But sometimes you get tired of doing that and you just want to kind of walk. But because you have such a strange dress on, if you don't wave at people, like security guards or whoever, then they start to get angry with you, So there was, I was walking in this part of the underground path called Scotiabank Tower. They have these huge bank towers. And I was walking there, and there's tons of people in this underground path. And all of a sudden, I see the security guard. So, you see all kinds of security guards. It's a public place. You can walk there anytime you want. It's kind of open. And so I saw him, and I nodded. And he goes, where are you going? And I was like, I'm going over there, And he said, who's over there? And I was like, am I doing something wrong? And then he said, I'm a security guard. I have the right to ask you where you're going. Who's there? Where are you going? And I said, I'm going to Union Station. And he's like, why are you going to Union Station? Who's at Union Station? And I'm like, why are you asking me where I'm going? I was like, there's all these people around here, and I'm looking, I'm pointing at them. I'm like, why are you asking me? What's your purpose in asking me where I'm going? Why? And he's like, I'm a security guard. I've got a right to ask you where you're going. And I said, anyways, I just left. And I was walking around, and I was thinking, what's the appropriate thing to do here? Because I got kind of angry with this guy. I've kind of had encounters with security guards before. And, previous times I've just said nothing. And I was thinking, okay, well, this time I'm going to say something to a certain degree. And kind of say something back to a certain degree. And so then I was walking on this kind of underground path, and I kept going. And, some of the security guards there I know and have waved to several times before. So I thought to myself, well, should I let this go? Or is this something that I should pursue further? Say more things about? So I asked one of these kind of security guards who worked there for a long time. I was like, this is what just happened to me with this young security guard. And I was like, what's going on there? Like, what can I do about this? And he said, well, you should go talk to his supervisor. It's like, people can't stop you and harass you. You're just walking down on the path. It's a kind of public place. Just because you look different, they're not allowed to do that. So then I walked a little further, and I asked another security guard. And she said, you should go talk to his supervisor. So then I started thinking about it, and I was like, well, what's the correct balance given this situation? Okay, like usually not reacting, not saying anything is one thing, but, maybe this security guard, like he should learn a lesson. Like he's a young dude, you can't harass people who are randomly walking. And also, I don't want to feel weird walking down there. It's a public place. So eventually I decided I would go up and ask this guy to speak to his supervisor. So I made my way back there, to where he was, and ran into this kind of cleaning lady. And I was like, I'd like to find the security head office. Where is it? And I was like, this is what happened to me. I met this young security guard, And he kind of rudely asked me where I was going, asked me who I was seeing. And she's like, well, there's this new guy. I've never seen him before. He's over there. So that's where that security guard was. He was sitting over in the spot. So I went up to him, and I said, I'd like to speak to your supervisor. And he said, okay, do you have a pen? Get a pen. He's looking up at me like right away, like, get a pen then. You can talk to him anytime you want. He'll be happy. I'm doing my job. And he's like, do you have a number? And I took out my phone, and I was like, okay, give me his number. And he's like, 345 XXX. And I was thinking, well, this is strange that he knows his supervisor's cell phone number off by heart. And anyways, we get to talking more. And he says, I'm sorry. If I hurt you, I'm sorry. And I said, well, I'm sorry too. That wasn't a good way to react. But and part of what I was thinking, well, shouldn't have been stopping me like that. But then anyways, then he goes, I'm sorry I hurt you. And I said, well, that's okay. And he said, where are you from? I'm like, I'm from Canada. Where are you from? I'm from Bangladesh. And then I asked him, what's your name? And he said, my name is Iqbar. And I said, okay. And then I left and, continued walking on the path for the usual amount of time. And the following day, I was still thinking about it. And I was like, well, should I pursue this further or not? I'm like, what's the right balance here? Because, I'm not really too happy that this guy just accosted me on the path like that. So I phoned up his security company. And I said, this is what happened to me. Is this, part of your standard operating policy, like that security guards can do this? And the manager I got put through to said, no, that's not part of our operating policy. I would be getting like 40 calls a day if people were doing this. He said, you can go talk to his supervisor. They'll take care of it, which would have meant I'd have to go downtown. But I got suspicious because the guy gave me his security guard supervisor's name, and he said his name was Iqbar. And then when I asked him what his name was, he said his name was Iqbar. So all these kind of pieces started coming together, and I was like, wait a minute, I think he gave me his phone number and asked me to call him so that I'd call him up and he'd be like, yeah, he's doing a great job, That's what security guards are supposed to do. Anyways, so then, you have this kind of WhatsApp app on your phone. So I was looking up this number, and I accidentally pressed the WhatsApp call button, and a photo of him came up. So the number rang, and then I hung it up because I didn't want to call him, And he called me back. And so I picked up the WhatsApp phone call, and I was like, yeah, Iqbar, this is the Buddhist monk that you talked to yesterday. And he's like, oh, I think you have the wrong number. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. And so we hung up. And then I was thinking to myself further. I was like, what should I do in this situation? I'm still not too happy that this guy, lied to me, gave me his phone number, tried to pull the wool over my eyes. And then also that he harassed me. I'm a Canadian citizen. We all have a right to walk on the path here. And, how much of a lesson should I teach him? There are kind of two options. I could go downtown and, actually talking to this other security guard, that actually crosses the line for harassment. It's possible that I could, you could do serious things to people who harass you. And you can actually, it's criminal to harass people. So I could go downtown, but I actually had his number right there. Kind of thinking about it, what's the right balance? So what I decided to do was I sent him a text. And I said, Iqbar, this is the Buddhist monk that you met last night. And, it seems that you've given me your phone number with the intention to pretend that you were your supervisor. And I said, I want you to know that I phoned the head office of your security company and asked them if your behavior was appropriate. And they said that security guards have no right to question people who are going where they're going. And then I said to him, in the text I said, I was a young man once too, and have made my fair share of mistakes, so I don't have any plans to take this further, but I hope this will be a lesson to you that this kind of behavior is inappropriate in Canada, which is a multicultural, multi-religious country. And then I said, again, I'm not planning to take this any further, something like that. But I hope this behavior won't be repeated either with myself or with other people. And so then left it at that. And I know it's his number, so I think he got the message. But he didn't respond. And so these are the kind of situations that come up all the time. Whether it's with a security guard, whether it's with whatever, there's a lot of gray areas in life that are difficult to calibrate just with the principles in the text. They're difficult to calibrate just with, or without any principles at all. So this is why both these things, the principles that are in our religious texts, the principles that we learn from our teachers, as well as the given elements of a situation, have to come together to determine what's appropriate behavior. And this is why our meditation practice is so much more than just sitting on the ground watching our breath. It's so much more than just learning what the suttas have to say. What it means is all these things have to come together. Our knowledge of the principles of the Buddhist teaching have to come together. The clarity of mind that we gain in meditation practice has to come together. And all these things have to come together to help us determine how to act so that our defilements don't increase, so that our good qualities increase in whatever gray area we might find ourselves in. And this is something that we can't learn necessarily from another person. We can observe how they act. We can see how they do things in a given situation. But the variables that go into life are so complex, we can't memorize how to react for everything. What that means is we have to develop this skill ourselves. We have to learn how to apply these teachings ourselves to make our life at ease, to react in ways that are appropriate, and to gain in wholesome qualities amidst all the variety of situations that we encounter. This is the amazing thing about the Buddhist teachings, is that it starts in the books this way. It starts in formal situations where we're meditating, but it has the potential to lead to skill, to lead to a skill in living one's life in line with the Dhamma, to lead to a skill, an ability to adapt oneself in situations so that one's wholesome qualities increase, so that one's unwholesome qualities decrease, and so that one can find happiness amidst all the variables that one encounters in life.